Lightbox is a popular library of CSS and JavaScript code used to display images in an appealing way on top of the current page. To see an example, search the internet for Lightbox. Here is the URL to Lightbox 2, created by Lokesh Dakar, that I am looking for. Clicking on examples, you can see that Lightbox may be used with images individually or as a set. When you click on an individual image, you see the image open up and expand on top of the page. The image may be closed by pressing the X icon at the bottom, or by clicking anywhere outside of the image. Clicking on the other individual image, you can see that captions may be specified for the images as well. Going back to the page and clicking on the first image of the 4-image set, you now have an indicator of which image of the set you are looking at. The caption is still optional. In a set, hovering over the right side of the image makes the forward arrow appear if you are not already on the last image of the set. Clicking on the image while the forward arrow is visible opens up the next image of the set. Likewise, hovering over the left side of the image makes the back arrow appear if you are not already on the first image of the set. Clicking on the image while the back arrow is visible opens up the previous image of the set. On my desktop, I have a folder with an index.html page that is being used as an image gallery, an images folder that contains the images that make up the image gallery, and a thumbnails folder containing smaller thumbnails of the gallery images. Opening the page in a browser, you can see there is currently a hover effect on the images. You can also see that the site is responsive. You can see as you resize the window, the images adjust in size to fill the screen, and the number of images per row decreases for smaller screens. Clicking on the images currently has no effect. That is what you will use Lightbox for. All of this was created in the previous video titled Creating an Image Gallery, but you may download the files from the link under the video to work along from this point. Open the index.html page in an editor. Watch the previous video if you would like a full explanation of the code. Let's review it a bit as we make a change to the hover effect. Notice, on screen sizes with a width less than or equal to 600px, the width of the images are 99% of the width of the gallery div they are inside of, resulting in one image per row. The extra 1% is used for padding around the image, including 0.5% to the left of the image and 0.5% to the right of the image. Similarly, for screens with a width greater than 600px up through 1000px, the width of the images are 49% of the width of the gallery div they are inside of, resulting in 2 images per row. Again, the extra 1% is used for padding around the image. Finally, for screens with a width greater than 1000px, the width of the images are 24% of the width of the gallery div they are inside of, resulting in 4 images per row, with the extra 1% used for padding. Instead of adding a yellow background to the images when hovered over, let's make them increase a bit in size. First, change the padding of 0.5% to a margin of 0.5%. The only reason padding was being used was so we could set a background color to the IMG element that would be visible. Using margin just seems more logical, so now the space around the images are outside of the IMG element. Technically, you should see no difference in behavior regardless of whether the space is created through the padding or margin property. Remove the background color style from the image's hover effect. Instead, set the width to 25% and the margin to 0. This should make the image take up the entire 25% with no extra space around it. Create a style for the hover effect in the media query for medium-sized screens. Here, set the width to 50%. You do not need to set the margin to 0 because this style that was applied previously will still be in effect. Create one last style for the hover effect in the media query for small-sized screens and set the width to 100%. Now when you view the page at a large size, hovering over an image makes it increase slightly in size. The same is true when hovering over the image at the medium size and at the small size. Hopefully you are up to speed on the code now and ready to provide the users the ability to click on the thumbnails to view the full-size gallery images. Moving down to the HTML, you see all the IMG elements inside of the gallery div. To avoid unwanted space between the images, no spaces, tabs, or line breaks are included between IMG elements. However, the code with each IMG element is about to grow significantly, so a different approach would be helpful for code readability. Add line breaks after each IMG element. If you were to view the page now, you would see that the additional space between images now disrupts the intended number of images per row. We will fix this momentarily. First, add a comment above the IMG elements inside the gallery div with the text "Commenting between IMG elements to avoid unwanted space." This line of code is an example of how to add a comment within code that will be seen by developers but not displayed on the web page itself. Comments are useful to provide additional information to yourself and to other developers. Comments may be used to specify credit for the code and licensing information. Comments are also useful in debugging, allowing the developer to comment out blocks of HTML code temporarily to see what impact the code has on the page. Back to the spacing issue. We are going to use a trick to get rid of the space while maintaining code readability. After the first IMG element, begin a comment. You can see by the gray syntax highlighting that everything after this is now part of a comment. Now put the cursor just in front of the second IMG element and close the comment. It is a bit funky, but we have effectively moved all the spaces, tabs, and line breaks into the comments so that no space between the IMG elements will be added on the page. Do this for all the other images at once. While holding the Control or Command key down, click behind each IMG element, except for the last one, to add multiple cursors. Add the code to begin the comments. Use the right arrow key to move the cursors in front of the IMG elements and then close the comment. View the page to ensure that the images in the gallery appear as intended. There are other methods to dealing with the space in between elements with a display of inline block, but the commenting trick is my preference. Using multiple cursors in front of each IMG element, add an anchor element with an href value of images/.jpg. Move the cursor to the end of the IMG elements to add the close A tag. Add in the file names of the images in front of the .jpg extensions. For convenience, the images were named with letters from A.jpg to L.jpg. Now the images displayed on the page are still from the thumbs folder, but these images are now hyperlinks. When clicked on, they will link to another file. Instead of linking to another HTML page, as is often done, clicking on the thumbnail image will link to the corresponding JPG image file in the Images folder. Save and refresh to test this out in a browser. You can tell the images are hyperlinks because the cursor changes to a hand when hovering over them. Also, at least in this version of Chrome, the URL of the hyperlink is displayed at the bottom left of the browser window. Clicking on the hyperlinked thumbnail image opens up the image file. Click the back button to return to the gallery page. Sometimes this may be the behavior you want, but the use of Lightbox in this case will provide the user a better experience. Back on the Lightbox website, under Getting Started, you can follow these instructions to add Lightbox to your site. Unless the instructions or process changes, the demonstration I'm about to provide should work for you as well. Download the latest version as a zip file. I am saving this to my desktop. If you are on a Mac, extract the files to the same location simply by double-clicking the zip file. On a PC, unzip or extract the files by right-clicking on the zip file and selecting Extract All. The files will extract to a folder on my desktop. Explore the extracted folder until you find a folder named dist. Here you will find all the files you need to make Lightbox work on your site. First, there is a CSS folder with 2 CSS files. Open the lightbox.css file in an editor to view the code. Here you can see all the CSS code that has already been written for us to provide a nice visual style. Open the lightbox.min.css file in an editor. Notice all the code is in one line. This is the same code we just saw before, but all the white space, spaces, tabs, and line breaks have been removed. You may use either file when implementing Lightbox. The uncompressed version is obviously better if you want to modify the CSS in any way. The minimized version is better if you do not want to modify the CSS and you do not want others in your development team to modify the code. Additionally, the minimized version of the code will have a slightly smaller file size and so will download a bit faster for the visitors of your site. Close both of the Lightbox CSS files and return to the File Explorer. Go out of the CSS folder and into the Images folder. Here you can see the images used for the Lightbox interface. You could easily swap out these images with your own custom images as long as you use the same file names, or modify all instances of the file names in the code. Finally, in the JS folder, you will find several JavaScript and map files. JavaScript is beyond the scope of this video, but basically it provides the functionality for Lightbox. You may open the lightbox.js file to view the code if you would like to see what JavaScript looks like. Again, there is a minimized version that consists of the same code with all the white space stripped out. Lightbox takes advantage of another popular set of pre-written JavaScript code called jQuery. jQuery has many uses and will be discussed in future videos. Using one of these files would be appropriate if you were already using the jQuery library in your site. However, if you are not using jQuery already, as is the case with the gallery site, then you can use one of the Lightbox JavaScript files that includes all the jQuery code. Move the dist folder into the folder with your website files. Rename the folder to Lightbox. These are the only files needed to add Lightbox to your site, so now you can delete the zip file and the folder with all the remaining extracted files. Remember, the Lightbox files you will be using are now all inside of the Lightbox folder that is in the same location as the index.html page that will be linking to them. Back on the Lightbox webpage, you can see the line of code to link to the CSS file and JavaScript file. Copy the link to the CSS and paste it in your code in the head section. By placing it above the CSS code you have already written, you can be sure that your styles will not be overridden by the styles in the Lightbox style sheet. Change the value of the href to the proper path and file name. Copy the link to the JavaScript and paste it in your code just before the close body tag. Placing the JavaScript at the bottom will ensure the elements on the page have loaded before the JavaScript code, which may be manipulating elements on the page, executes. Change the value of the src to have the proper path and file name. Now we have included all the CSS and JavaScript code for Lightbox into our project, and we just need to modify the code for the IMG elements to utilize the code. For the first IMG element, add the data-lightbox attribute with a value of funart. Save and refresh the web page to test out the new functionality. If you click on the first image, it should open up with Lightbox. If it does not, review all of the steps and be sure you linked correctly to the CSS and JavaScript Lightbox files. Back to the code, let's add the data-lightbox attribute to the second IMG element with a value of the wife. On the web page, the first image opens up in Lightbox, and the second image opens up in Lightbox, but they are independent of each other. There is no forward or back button to move from image to image. You can combine any number of images into a series by setting the same value for their data-lightbox attribute. Back in the code for the second IMG element, change the wife to funart, the same value being used by the first IMG element. After saving and refreshing, now you can move through the images of the series without having to close and reopen Lightbox. Copy and paste the code for Lightbox into all the other IMG elements in the gallery div. Save, refresh, and then open the series in Lightbox. If you are using the same files as I am, you should see there are a total of 12 images in the series. You should click through to view them all to ensure they all appear as expected. If any image does not, check the HTML code to ensure the file path, file name, and file extension specified for the image is correct. You can easily add captions to any of the images you want using the data-title attribute. Back in the code, add the data-title attribute to the first IMG element with a value of the wife. Save and refresh. Now when you open up the image in Lightbox, the caption appears under the image. Back in the code, we are going to add just a tiny bit of JavaScript code to set some of the options for how Lightbox will behave. Just under the link to the Lightbox.js file, before the close body tag, add in a script tag and close script tag. Between these, we can write in our own JavaScript code that utilizes functions provided to us in the pre-written Lightbox JavaScript. I am not going to explain the syntax of JavaScript here, but I will say that unlike HTML and CSS, it is case sensitive. Option in all lowercase is not the same as option with an uppercase O. Type in lightbox.option followed immediately by an open and close parentheses. Copy all of this code carefully as it is easy to make errors in JavaScript. For instance, a space before the open parentheses would cause an error and result in the code not executing. Inside the parentheses, add an open curly brace followed by a closed curly brace. Inside the curly braces, you can specify options and values. For instance, try setting the fade duration to 5000. The option name must be in single quotes and separated from the value with a colon. In this case, the 5000 represents 5000 milliseconds, which is equal to 5 seconds. Save and refresh. Now when an image opens in Lightbox, it takes a full 5 seconds for the image to fade in. Back in the code, change the fade duration to 500 so it will take only 500 milliseconds, or half a second, for the images to fade in. Use a comma as a separator to list multiple options. Set the value for the position from top option to 0. Save and refresh. Now when an image opens in Lightbox, it takes only half a second to fade in, and it is positioned at the very top of the page. You can find a list of all the options for changing behaviors on the Lightbox website. For each option, you can see what the default value is, and a description of the option is provided. Scrolling down a bit further, you can see that the Lightbox library was developed to have cross-browser support. Of course, it is a bit more work if you want to support older versions of Internet Explorer. Scrolling down further, you can see that the license for this code provides you with 100% free use for both commercial and non-commercial use. The only condition is that you must leave the attribution in the code that gives credit to the creator. For now, my friends, that is all I have to say about using Lightbox for an image gallery.